Hey everyone, welcome back to D Squared Stories, an audio fiction podcast bringing you short, serialized weekly stories. We'll be continuing with the next chapter of Wonderful Baking Lodge. Today's bake featured in the episode comes to us from Suzanne from Bunbo Bay. So thanks so much to her for letting me use her recipe later on in this episode. You can find her recipes at Bunbo Bay, BUNBOBAE.com. Without further ado, let's get into a quick recap and get started. Last time, I finally got to live one of my wildest dreams and compete in the television show Wonderful Baking Lodge, judged by Peter Broadway and Penelope Lay, and hosted by comedy duo Tama and Bahama. I was so starstruck arriving that I did not notice little things here and there that seemed off. I got to meet my fellow contestants, Dylan, Marcus, and Samantha. There was also Cheyenne, who seemed quite rude, and Miguel, who seemed erratic and stressed out about a chair he saw. After getting the Broadway bump in the first challenge, I was riding sky high. But then I got some bad directions and accidentally opened a door to find Miguel, who had been eliminated, seemingly executed in a makeshift electric chair. I scrambled for help and found Peter and Cheyenne making out in a closet. Peter walked over and knocked on the door and... Chapter 2. One Tough Cookie. My breath caught as he opened the door. He peered into the room and then stepped inside. Cheyenne, seeming perplexed, stepped in behind him. The chair was still in the center of the room, but Miguel and the electrodes were completely gone. The control module I had seen hooked up to it was no longer there as well. How was this possible? It could have at most only been 2 minutes since I stumbled in here a moment ago. I saw Miguel in here, I rambled. He was strapped down to that chair. Cheyenne looked at me with a bit of concern. I think the panic in my voice communicated to her that I did see something, or at least I thought for sure I saw something. Peter scratched his chin and seemed to scan the room. He turned towards me. The room was dark and dim like it was before, but the little bit of light in the room reflected off his bright blue eyes so beautifully. An, are you sure you saw Miguel in here? He asked. He asked in such a way that made me feel like he genuinely cared. I thought through my memories carefully. I was sure that I walked into this room and saw Miguel in a state that could only be described as post-execution. Could I have imagined that, though? I feel like I know what I saw, but at the same time, that surely could not have been real. I thought so, I said. But thinking on it, it feels like there's no way that could be true. Cheyenne's face went from concern to annoyance. That's one hell of a thing to hallucinate, she said angrily. She huffed and stomped off in a hurry. This time I guess I found it kind of hard to blame her. I would be really freaked out too if someone told me they saw someone strapped down and held against their will, and then just said never mind a few moments later. I brought my hands to my face and fought against the urge to cry. Peter lightly patted me on the shoulder. It's all right. There, he said softly. I don't make a habit of telling people outside the show this, but I truly believe the lodge might be haunted. You're not the first to see horrific things. My eyes widened. Really? I've never heard of that before. Well, of course. All contestants sign a non-disparagement agreement. Saying there's evil ghosts around the lodge is about as disparaging as it gets, isn't it? I smiled and gently wiped a few tears from my face. I guess that's true. Sorry for the scare. Gosh, I feel so bad for Miguel. He must have saw something similar. He was also going on about a chair. So I heard. Yes, that combined with his condition, I bet he was quite rattled. He should be in a cab on his way home now, though. Don't fret. Go get some lunch before the next challenge. I'm looking forward to tasting your next bakes. Peter escorted me over to the picnic area they had set up just outside the lodge. As he did this, all the crew and production folk seemed to stare warily at me. They seemed a bit nervous about where I was coming from, and the fact that he was with me. I snuck some glances at Peter's face, but he seemed completely unfazed by it. He patted me one last time on the shoulder as he went off somewhere else after bringing me to a table full of finger sandwiches. I piled up a plate with the sandwiches. Towards the left side, there were also thin slivers of everyone's cake from the previous challenge. I made sure to get a bit of Dylan's and Marcus's because I thought they looked the best. I was ready to make my way over to them when suddenly someone stood next to me in line. He had a baseball cap to cover his face and a jacket covering himself up. You saw it, didn't you? He asked. I felt a twitch of shock go down my side. It was Donnie, the absent-minded audio tech who gave me the wrong directions to go that way in the first place. His face looked grave, a stark departure from the carefree attitude he had shown in every other moment. What do you mean? I asked. Please don't play dumb with me right now. You saw what they're doing, what they'll do to everyone who gets eliminated. My hands started shaking. No, I imagined it. This place is just haunted. You can't really buy that right. Miguel didn't. He didn't have anxiety or anything. He just saw the truth. You need to get out of here. ASAP. Hey, Donnie, we'd like to have a word with you, a voice said. 2 burly security guards came over to us. They were trailed by a handful of production assistants who looked annoyed. They seemed dead set on breaking up our conversation as soon as possible. Donnie did not even look at them, when suddenly one of them grabbed him by the arm. They started pulling him off towards the lodge, by the door that I had just come out of a moment ago. Best of luck, On, Donnie said. Don't lose. He went with them as they pulled him off and back into the lodge. The production assistants muttered among themselves, looking as if they wanted to say something to me. Before they could land on anything, I hurried over with my sandwiches and cake over to where most of the contestants were sitting. I sat right next to Dylan, who smiled at me. Hey, On, he said, smiling, before it faded. Whoa, are you okay? You look pale and you're shivering. I'm fine, I said, defensively. I caught the eyes of some of the others when I burst out like this. I just kept to myself and worked to chow down on my sandwiches as soon as I could. There was only a little bit of time before the next challenge started. I was incredibly rattled. I had just managed to get myself to a point where I was able to dispel what I saw as my imagination or the work of a ghost. But Donnie? That was real. The people escorting him away were real too. What was the meaning of all of this? It was ludicrous to believe that contestants who got kicked off the show were executed. Right, because they clearly are not. They show up in the What Are They Doing Now portion of the credits. Dylan and another contestant whose name I had yet to learn started throwing a disc around. The camera crew got out their equipment and started snapping some photos, and even had them pose for a moment. My jaw dropped. That looked frighteningly similar to some of the Where Are They Now photos. This could not be real. This could not be real. Thoughts seemed to run through my mind at a mile per minute. I jumped as Samantha put her hand on my shoulder. Oh, honey, it's just me, she said. The PAs are calling. It's time to get mic'd up for the mystery challenge. Right. I'll be right there. I felt like I was in a dream sequence as the audio techs got me hooked up again with all the microphones and recording equipment. There was a part of me that was so numb and another part of me that felt like I was going insane. I had to be, right? To what end would executing the losers on a baking show serve? That would be what Leah would tell me. She was grounded and rational. I needed to be more like Leah right now. I took in a deep breath after everything was tested and in place. I walked back into the challenge area. I stood at my station with confidence. I was ready to take on whatever mystery biscuit challenge they put in front of me. I put on my toughest face. Dylan seemed to notice as he walked in and commented. Hey, you're looking a lot better, he said. Yeah, I think my nerves were getting to me, but I'm ready to go. That's the spirit, Marcus said as he walked by us. I smiled. Everyone got set up at their stations. Then Tama, Bahama, and the judges both entered the area. Bakers, I hope you had a good lunch, Tama said. Your next challenge, a mystery to all of you, was set by Peter. Any words of wisdom, Peter? Take your time with the caramel. It needs to be perfect. Insightful as always, Blue Eyes White Dragon, Bahama said. All right, off you two. This challenge gets judged blind, so you don't get to know which millionaire makes what shortbread. Tama punched Bahama in the arm. Hey, you stole the reveal. Peter and Penelope walked out of the tent. My mind zoned out from the two comedians the second that they inadvertently revealed that the challenge was millionaire shortbread. I had never made it before, but I know I had seen it made, maybe even on this show. Peter's advice, while generic as always, did hold weight for me. Caramel was my enemy. It was hard to make, and in my opinion did not even taste that good. So much perfectly good chocolate had been ruined by caramel, and I was about to have to contribute to the tally. I tuned back in when they started counting down. 3, 2, 1, bake. The lodge burst with energy as everyone revealed their ingredients and took a look at their recipe, or rather more of a vague outline of a recipe for millionaire shortbread. I got immediately to work mixing the ingredients for the shortbread. It felt good to start with this, because I could make shortbread in my sleep. Leah's parents were particularly unadventurous eaters, so shortbread biscuits were a classic for me to make for a post-family dinner dessert. Time seemed to fly as I got the shortbread into the oven. Next was my rival, the bane of my existence, caramel. I mixed the ingredients in with the sugar in the saucepan and started to make it. In the meantime, I also tried to get the chocolate ready to be prepared. I was watching the caramel, it was coming along nicely, and then the moment I took my eyes off it for a second, I turned around to see it burn. I nearly cursed under my breath before realizing the camera was on me, though maybe I should have, to make the footage unusable. I I had told myself I would not look around at others during stressful points in the challenges, but I broke my vow, and I am glad that I did. Several contestants were redoing their caramel, even Marcus, who I thought was so unimpeachably perfect. I took my shortbread out of the oven and let it start cooling. I tried to look at the bright side, which was maybe I could pour the caramel right on top of the cooled shortbread now with this timing. I started making the caramel again. This time, though, I'd really messed it up, causing it to crystallize almost right away. Dang it, I muttered to myself. I noticed the camera was still on me. Another one came to get a different angle of me. I kind of just looked up at them, awestruck. This could not be happening. I imagined myself as the token disaster they showed in the preview of the episode. I imagined this playing alongside footage of everyone else succeeding at this challenge. I imagined the chair. I imagined Miguel. Suddenly, I felt the panic attack coming on. Not now, not now. Let's try this again, I said, trying to force myself to be determined. I went back in on making the caramel. There was a semi-distressing time call made, but if I worked really hard on this, I could still stay on track. I started mixing again, and just like before, crystallizing. I let out a distressed scream before I chucked the caramel almost immediately. Hey, what's the matter here? Bahama asked me. I'm next. Just like Miguel, I'm going to be next. Bahama looked at the camera operators and then towards the production assistant. I have no idea what he saw in their expression, but dread filled my being as I heard him say, "Oh, her too." I looked up at him as he made a squeamish facial expression and walked away. Her too? What did that mean? Peter had acted as if nothing had happened and as if he was none the wiser to what happened to Miguel. But were the hosts in on it? Was I really going to die because I keep ruining this caramel? There was nothing I could do. This was going to be the end of me. Time was running out. I was shocked free from my despair by Dylan shaking my shoulders. On, get a hold of yourself, he said. He grabbed my hand and lifted it up while looking me right in the eyes. The cameras were still right on us. I felt just the slightest bit uncomfortable with his forwardness towards me. Just make the caramel. You can do it. I'll help. Dylan started measuring out ingredients for me. The cameras around us stayed on us as I was frozen in fear. I started to feel myself come back to reality. I took over from Dylan, who gotten me started. This time, against all odds, the caramel gods seemed to smile on me as there were no issues. Dylan grabbed my hand and smiled at me. See? There's nothing the two of us can't do, he said, and then he looked at the camera with a grin. I stammered a bit in shock as I pulled my hand away. Oh, no, Dylan, I think you misunderstand. It was too late, though. He went back to his station. The cameras also seemed to conveniently not record my last sentence. I suppose this was not the most important thing at this time. I went back to my shortbread. There was barely enough time to finish everything and make the ganache. As we got down to the last bit, I knew the chocolate was going to melt a bit and not have time to set, but I was out of options. I took it out of the fridge, poured the chocolate over, and put it back in and prayed. I waited until the absolute last second to pull it out as the host called the challenge to a close. Cheyenne went up like a bullet train and put her shortbread on the second spot from the right. A production assistant put her photo facing away from the table by that spot. I took mine out and brought it up. I could hear it now, Peter's voice saying, "It's a right mess," because that is exactly what I thought as well. I put it down and let out a deep breath. My eyes caught as a woman around my age brought up hers, with a bit of a displeased expression. She was the contestant right behind Samantha. Maya was her name, I think. Hers looked as messy as mine, but to make matters worse, I think she burnt her caramel. I wanted to let out a sigh of relief but stopped myself, not just to avoid getting caught on camera as being obnoxious. It was also because I'm not sure I felt relieved. She seemed nice, and if what I thought was real, I did not want anyone to meet their end today. Peter and Penelope returned to the room to judge the challenge. Marcus, Dylan, and Samantha all did well. Peter seemed to take a particular liking to the one that was Cheyenne's, but Penelope seemed to think it was only decent. I tried to avoid having any visible reactions as they really laid into my millionaire shortbread. I got at least the slightest bit of confidence from hearing that it tasted better than it looked. Maya's got similar comments, but not the one about taste. They ranked the shortbreads from best to worst. Marcus took first, Cheyenne second, then one by one down the list, until it was just Maya and myself. I took a deep breath. "In eighth place," Peter said. "This one." He pointed at mine. I felt a wave of relief. I turned to Maya and saw her face sink a bit, but only in the way that any other contestant leaving would look. Of course she had no idea what I knew. No one else in this room did. A bunch of others hugged her and bade her farewell. It was my turn to say goodbye. I pulled her in for a tight hug and then whispered in her ear. "Don't go where they tell you," I said. Just leave this place as quickly as you can." She pulled back and looked confused at me. "Please just do it." To avoid suspicion, I let her go. I seemed to successfully not arouse the suspicion of the guards or production team as they stayed out of the way. Maya looked at me, somewhat concerned. She started to make her way towards the exit. The production team did not notice her leaving. She managed to slip out of the lodge. I then noticed that a couple of them seemed to scramble, eager to know where she went. I let out a real sigh of relief this time, one without any reservations. We were given our instructions. Tomorrow was our day off, to either fully rest up or to continue practicing our baking. We were dismissed and allowed to go back to our cabins. I made my way back, the sun almost fully setting. I put my key into my door and opened it. Before I went inside, I turned to my right to see 2 security guards carrying a large duffel bag. I thought it was peculiar. What was so heavy that they needed 2 of them to carry it? Then, I swear I saw it squirm. My face contorted in fear. I saw them glance over at me. No, glare at me. I slammed the door behind me and locked myself inside. No, please no. I wanted with every fiber of my being to believe I hallucinated what I just saw. I wanted it to all just be some sick dream. Miguel, Donnie, and now Maya. It was all too real, though. There was no way all of this was in my head, or the work of ghosts. Maybe the reason this place was thought to be haunted was because they kept killing people here. I had made up my mind. There was only one option. I would leave at midnight, under the cover of darkness. Even if I continued to win, I could not live with myself if I let others die. This was the only way I was going to get out. Go find authorities, people I could trust, and let them know what was going on here. Surely they would stop this madness. They could validate that Miguel and Maya were nowhere to be found. I stayed up, in excruciating anxiety as I waited for darkness to fully fall over the lodge area and for midnight to strike. I got up and put on my jogging clothes. They were a dark blue, which was the darkest color I had brought with me. I snuck out of the cabin with just the clothes on my back and my will to survive. I went past the lodge, looking on at this building, once my dream now turned into an absolute nightmare. I slunk past it, avoiding any lights. There were security guards roaming the road, which I had expected. My plan was to avoid the road but stay parallel to it in the woods. If I got pursued, I could dive deeper into the woods and abandon my knowledge of my whereabouts in a last-ditch effort to evade them. I must not have even made it a quarter of a mile before I saw the headlights pull up to the portion of the road that I could see. Taking no chances, I started to run off into the woods. I heard the sound of a dog barking. I stumbled a bit as I kept going, and eventually I saw more people running at me from further down the road. I did not make it far before I was completely cornered. I started to cry as security guards, masked men, dragged me back up to the roadside, cuffed me, and gagged me. They threw me into a car. They drove me back up to the lodge and dragged me in as I weakly resisted, kicking them and letting out muffled screams. They brought me in towards a chair. I was sitting across from the man in the mask, the executioner I had seen in the room before with Miguel. They ungagged me. I trembled and sobbed as, despite the mask, I felt his eyes bore into me with pure malice. "You there," he said. "So you know the reality of your situation." I could not form the words between sobs. I nodded my head in response. "No, you do not," he said. "You do not know that you have been implanted with a tracker. You do not know that as we speak, we have a car on standby in your neighborhood, a man ready to whisk your wife away if we need to do so." "No, leave Leah out of this," I screamed. "We intend to. Up until a certain point, of course." The man seemed to tap his fingers together, reveling like a freak loving his status as a supervillain. I could tell behind the mask was the biggest, most arrogant grin imaginable. Unearned arrogance, might I add, considering he had a legion of security just to hold back a petite Vietnamese woman. He continued in his crappy, fake deep voice. "If you lose, of course, we will need to make her disappear. She will create an alibi, an extended vacation, one that both of you don't return from." "You're all psychos. You're psychotic maniacs. There's no reason to do this. Stop this. Let all of us go." "I can't do that. I'm just a humble executor of a much higher will. 3 of you will get to leave here. Those who make it to the finals." "You think that's supposed to reassure me? Kick me into survival mode so I go in and bake like I never baked before? Subjecting all my competitors to the death I'm so desperately trying to avoid?" I bit my lip. I thought for a moment I sounded dumb. "Well, let's lay out your options. You could lose, killing yourself and Leah. You could try to warn the others, and assuming they believe you, they might try to escape and fail, since they're all chipped." He continued to do the tapping motion with his fingers that bothered me so much. "Then there's the last option. You be a good girl and bake. You win and you live. From there, it's up to you if you want to see how those NDAs and waivers you signed on hold up in court and with the cops. That, or you live a happy life with your wife as a micro-celebrity and just pretend this near-death experience never happened. I breathed deeply, trying to stave off the panic attack that honestly was only not occurring because of some miraculous surge of deep strength I never knew I had. I clenched my fist. I will bake. I will win if I have to, I said to him. The second I find a hole in your defenses, an opportunity to save the others, I will do it. I won't let you get away with this. We will have to see about that. Have a good night on. The guards grabbed me by the arms and forced me out of the lodge and back into my cabin. I let out a huff as they locked the door behind me. I broke down into tears on my bed. I felt so defeated. My tough talk in there was all bluster. And while I was in there, I was forced to sell it. I could almost believe it then myself, but not now. Now I was just someone in deep over their head. Eventually, despite everything, I managed to cry myself to sleep. I woke up in the morning, way earlier than I would have liked to the sound of rapping on my door. I braced myself for a production assistant or someone to show up to monitor me. I swung the door open, and my face softened when I saw Samantha. Hey there, honey, she said. You look stressed out. I was hoping we could bake a little together. It's no fun on my own. And now with Maya gone, it's a boys' club aside from me and you. And Cheyenne. I'm hoping you can figure why I chose you over her. I thought on it. She was right. It was just us 3 girls, then Marcus and Dylan. There were 3 other guys, too. I think their names were Johnny, Wyatt, and Harold. In the chaos of yesterday, I really did not get a chance to introduce myself. Without even an invitation, Samantha started her way into my cabin kitchen and pulled out her ingredients. It's just not the same baking while quiet, she continued without me responding. I always have my boys whipping up a storm while I'm trying to focus. It's always then they ask me 80 questions. My heart sank. I had a sudden vision of Samantha's sons growing up the rest of their lives without their mother. My mind drifted to Marcus and his 8 kids. Dylan seemed a bit young to have kids and never mentioned them. But what about the other 3 guys? Only 3 of us would make it to the finals and get to go back home to our families. This was so sick and twisted. Who could have conceived of this awful, callous waste of life? Something on your mind, sweetheart? She asked. You've been real quiet since lunchtime yesterday. Would it do any good to tell her? Miguel learning about the horrific truth of this competition only sent him into a mental breakdown, ensuring his loss. And it almost did the same to me yesterday. It was safe to assume we were all chipped. The best I could hope for was that we could somehow tell everyone by the end of the day and boycott the competition. That was assuming they would all even believe me. No, for right now, telling her would only cause us both to seem like lunatics. Just lost in thought about my bakes, I lied. Let's take turns. You can go first. We spent about 6 hours baking and snacking, taking turns working on perfecting our timings for tomorrow's challenges. After that session, and from the night before, I felt completely exhausted and found myself taking a quick nap after she left. When I awoke, I had the idea to test the limits on something. I logged into the desktop computer on my cabin and tried to pull up social media. The firewall blocked them all. Another idea popped into my head. I went to my blog, which was not blocked. Websites for recipes were probably some of the only things not blocked on here, so that we could punch up our recipes. That seemed to be the only point in letting us have internet connections, after all. I logged into my blog as the admin. I started to think carefully about what to post. I knew I should be quick about it, since they might be monitoring me. But should I just go right out and say what's happening? Or should I try to be cryptic and hope Leah can read between the lines? In just the few moments I spent pondering this question, I got a notification that said the network admin has taken remote control. They closed out of my blog and disabled my access to the internet. I clenched my fist. Really? This sucks. None of this made sense. The amount of manpower needed to monitor us in real life, monitor our internet access, to guarantee nothing about what was going on made it to the outside? I had an odd thought in that moment about the nature of reality TV. I considered how wild it was that people willingly gave up sometimes months of their life and freedom. It was obviously not the same as what was going down here, but it was probably only a few more steps down the ladder logically. This felt like a waste of time to think about, though. I had just enough time in the day to practice my recipe one more time for tomorrow, so that's what I decided to do. I felt helpless, but all I could do at this point was stay alive for long enough until I could figure out how to do something meaningful. With one last practice put on the books, I went to bed and somehow managed to sleep in spite of everything going on around me. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed vigor. I just knew somehow today something was going to be different. I marched into the lodge and was the first to get there and get outfitted with all my recording equipment. The team all seemed a bit surprised. It was clear to me that just about anyone working on the production staff knew what was going on, which made me a little sick to my stomach. Nonetheless, I would not let myself be a pawn in their game. Cheyenne walked in after me, seemingly surprised to find that anyone had beaten her here. She eyed me with a sort of suspicion, which it took me a while to figure out why, when it suddenly hit me. Of course! I had completely forgot about it due to the much larger issues at hand, but I had walked in on her having an affair with Peter yesterday. I overheard them talking about not making it obvious that she was the favorite. I never even thought to factor that into my calculations. Peter, regardless of whether he was in on the whole operation, was not going to let his little fling partner go home as long as they were having fun together. Between that and Marcus's raw skill in the kitchen, the rest of us were all really just fighting for that third slot in the finals. The rest of the contestants trickled in and were shortly followed by the judges and hosts. "Bakers, welcome back. Hope you had a restful day yesterday," Bahama said. "Today, it's a very special challenge, an ingredient cap challenge. You must make a delicious dessert with only a total of 7 different ingredients or less," Tama added. This was a challenge I had actually been really looking forward to before the whole "if you die in the game, you die in real life" thing. I had just the dessert for the occasion. 3, 2, 1, bake. We got started and I wasted no time getting right into it. At least that was my intention. But this time around, Peter and Penelope started their rounds with me. "An, what are you preparing for us today?" Penelope asked. I studied her face carefully. She seemed way too sweet a woman to possibly be involved in all of this. But could I be 100% sure? "I'm making a Vietnamese corn pudding with a coconut cream sauce," I paused. "Oh, wait, you might refer to it here as a corn custard." Peter's eyebrows raised again, just like the other day. "Don't you think that might be a little too sweet? Coconut cream and corn? Really, with the limited ingredients available, I'm surprised you went with something as uncomplex as corn." I sort of stared back a bit in disbelief. It's corn. A big lump with knobs. I can't imagine a more beautiful thing. I wanted to say that, but instead I said, "I think you'll find it to be a wonderful summer dessert." "We'll see. Good luck then, An." I tried to shake those comments off and not let them derail me. That was a little odd, I thought. It was not incredibly out of character for Peter from what I had seen on the show, though. I tried to stay fully focused on making my dessert. The cameras never seemed to point far enough away from me at any point in time, seemingly ready for me to start breaking down. However, this time, they would not get the satisfaction. I noticed after some time they just started filming me like normal and asking me the standard questions to use as B-roll footage. Tama even came over for a quick corn joke at one point, but I was too tunnel visioned to recall the specifics. It seemed like as long as I was playing ball and not screaming about executions, they were still willing to use me as long as I made for captivating television. At some point, Dylan, who seemed to be making a simple dark chocolate mousse, came over to me while the camera was still on him. He waited for me to not be in the middle of something, and to turn to him before he grabbed my hands again. "I just wanted to make sure you were doing well after the other day," he said. "You seem like you're back to your brilliant self." Dylan turned his face away from the camera and winked with one of his eyes. He did this not flirtatiously, but as a kind of signal telling me to play along. For the life of me, I could not figure out what he was doing, and I was really starting to dislike the way that he felt like it was okay to touch my hands like this. My gut said something about him was trustworthy, though, and right now I just needed someone to trust. "I am. Your words yesterday really helped lift me out of that funk. I'm so thankful," I said. The cameras seemed really interested in this, another one of them pulling off from Cheyenne to come to get a different angle of us. I fought the deep-seated desire to peek at her and see her enraged expression, but I didn't because I wanted to keep this act up. Dylan went back to his station and shot me a knowing look and a thumbs up once the cameras were off us. I finished my dessert with a few moments to spare. Now it was time for judgment. It was a rather standard set of comments for everyone. Dylan and Samantha did fine. Marcus did amazing, getting a fist bump. Peter thought Cheyenne's was amazing, and Penelope thought it was only okay. Wyatt seemed to get some particularly sharp comments from Penelope on the flavor combinations and execution, but Peter seemed to brush them off as unimportant. Now it was time for me. I looked on with a bit of confidence as they both tried it. I had done everything to perfection, even more than in my practice runs. To my surprise, Peter frowned a bit. "I think it just lacks a hero flavor," he said. "I think something punchier like cinnamon would have added to it." "Cinnamon, sir?" Those words almost slipped from my lips. Instead, I focused more on my television perception and just said, "Oh no, that's unfortunate." Penelope, my heroic angel, said, "I think it's quite lovely. A real triumph. It's just like you said, a real refreshing summer treat." "Thank you," I said. They went back to their table and deliberated for a bit. This, so far, was the longest they had deliberated on a judgment, even more so than the last one, which I thought was pretty tight. A sinking pit formed in my stomach as I realized that this was a battle of resilience between Peter and Penelope. He wanted me gone. She, if I had to guess, was more inclined to send Wyatt to the chair. Again, I still lacked any certainty that either of them were aware of what was happening here, though I was starting to guess that Peter might be a bit in the loop. Either that or he really hates corn. I felt Dylan tap me on the shoulder. Sorry to thrust that on you. I meant to talk to you yesterday, but you didn't answer when I knocked. He must have shown up during my nap. He continued. I noticed that the cameras paid attention to us yesterday when I was reassuring you. I think playing up our chemistry might be a strategy for staying in. This is a competition, but it's also reality TV too. People want to see a Peeta and Katniss. A Hunger Games reference. I wonder if he had any clue just how on the money that was. I'm not really sure that's how it works, Dylan, I said. I noticed out of the corner of my eye there was a cameraman focusing on this conversation. I also noticed a production assistant taking note of it. He seemed to run over to the judges as they were deliberating to say something. I wouldn't be so sure. Dylan walked back over to his station with a smug smile on his face. He got a boost of confidence from this, but I got a sense of dread. They could have thought I was warning Dylan about their secret. He could have been weighing in to finally get rid of me before I caused too much damage. They called over the hosts. Then they assembled us all and started rolling again. Bakers, this gets harder every single week, Thomas said. And I'm fortunate to not be the one to send anyone home today, but Bahama is not so lucky. It's true, he said, pausing for a while. The person who will not be joining us for the next challenge is... Thank you so much for listening to this chapter of Wonderful Baking Lodge. If you enjoyed, please rate the podcast on the app, give it a like on YouTube, and share with anyone who you think might also enjoy. Once again, thanks to Suzanne for the corn pudding recipe that served as an inspiration in this episode. You can find her recipes at Bunbo Bay. That's BUNBOBAE.com. Wonderful Baking Lodge is a D Squared Stories production. You can stay up to date with Wonderful Baking Lodge and all future D Squared Stories productions by finding us on social media. That'll be D Squared Stories across just about any of the big platforms. I appreciate you listening and hope to have you listen again next week.